Yes, my dear students, I am Mr. Emmanuel Charles. I'm a teacher of linguistics and literature. So today I needed to share with you in literature, that is language 2. Today we shall see how language match together with literature. In the context of the community, language is the key of communication, of which means that it connects one person with another person through communication. Now, because literature is existing from the community, now there is a relationship between literature and the language. That is what I mean. So, due to the existence of literature in the community, and the language is being used to pass information from one person to another person. So now, it is true that there is the relationship between literature and the language. So today, I want to share with you in this that how language and literature can relate. So let us see now language and literature. Here, I have tried to sum up or to summarize so that now you can understand very well what is the meaning of literature and what is the meaning of language. And at the previous session, I talked about literature and I talked about language. So now today, let me go direct now to talk about language and literature. These are two terms that cannot be separated anymore. So now, when we are talking about the two entities that cannot be split anymore, or you cannot separate literature and language. That why now we cannot separate literature and language. Literature exists in the community. Now we could say literature is the product of the human being, of which now the human being, through involving in social and economic activities, they produce literature. Example, we have an artist or we have a musician, and those musicians are existing in the community, whereby now those musicians, they compose poems or poetry, of which now those poems or poetry are being composed through using language. So that's why today we are learning about the relationship between literature and language. So there is no means or there is no way how you can separate language and literature, because these are two independent disciplines that exist in the community. So here, as we say that language and literature are two terms or entities that cannot be separated anymore. Means you cannot separate literature and the language in the community, because both of them are in the community. So now today let us see. That is because literature depends on language. How does literature depend on language? So the existence of literature depends on the presence of the language. Because as we see that literature does not come from the vacuum. So now if literature does not come from the vacuum, so literature exists in a particular community where the human beings exist. So at any particular place where people involving in economic activities, they are using language so that they can communicate. So through communication now, or through language, it is where now literature develop. So here, I want to show the way how the literature and the language match together. So therefore, literature and the language relates as follows. So I want to show you the relationship between literature and the language. Here, the first point is that language is a tool for communication through which people in the society or in the particular community communicates literature to each other. Through language now we can communicate literature. How this? Example you can see in the novel A Man of the People. In the novel A Man of the People, Ngugi wa Thiong'o used the literary language, that is figurative speech, and the other languages. Employ the use of language, that is is sometimes very difficult to interpret for a person if is not aware with the literature, or a person who does not specialize in literature. It's very difficult to interpret that kind of language or to translate. So here now, as language used in literature, because of the incidents or because of the intended meaning to be presented in a particular community, now the author Ngugi wa Thiong'o in the novel A Man of the People uses language. As he uses language now, that is where now we can find that through uses language, that is where now literature exists. So you create thinking in your mind. So you present your thinking and the feeling and emotion into the written form. That is written literature. So now, after creating now that that books or that emotion, feelings and ideas to convert into written form, that is where you can create poetry, play and a novel. So by referring in the novel that is A Man of the People, Ngugi wa Thiong'o uses language to present literature. So now here we can say language is a tool for communication through which people in the society communicate literature to each other. So now Ngugi wa Thiong'o used the language to communicate literature, or to communicate literature to each other in the society of Nigerian people. Also you can refer in the play that is Betray in the City. Betray in the City, written in Kenya, in Kafira state. Also the author used the language to present or to communicate literature to the people, especially the citizens who are living in Kafira state. So people who are living in the Kafira state, now they communicate each other through reading literature, of which now that literature has been composed through using language. And that language is a language that is full of figurative speech. That is simile, metaphor, rhetorical questions, onomatopoeia, and the other like idioms. So it is true that language and literature cannot be split to each other. Now, my dear student, that is we are talking about the first point. So now let us see point number 2. Point number 2, that is literature uses language skills in composing literary works, such as writing skills, reading skills, speaking skills, listening skills, in delivering the message. It is true that literature uses language because literature involves listening, that is listening skills, speaking skills, writing skills, and so on. So when literature involves these entities, now there is no way you can escape to use language in composing literature. Example, you can even involve in the poems. Example, the poem like The Wonderful Surgeon or Eat More by Joe Collier. The Wonderful Surgeon or Eat More by Joe Collier, it is a poem that uses language, of which now the language that is used in that poem is not direct forward. It has a full of figurative speech or figurative language, because it is a tendency of the authors to use figurative language so that now the message to be conveyed or to be delivered in the community should not be direct, so that now the reader, even sometimes the author, is criticizing maybe the reader or is talking about the poor leadership. But the message after being delivered in the community will not be direct. It needs much reading skills, and it needs much thinking, high thinking, so that now the reader can understand the intended message presented with the author. So here, as we see now, literary works such as writing skills, you use the skills in writings, but in case of writing, So when we are writing books, or we are writing poetry, we are writing novel, we are writing plays, or we are writing short stories and the other writings, here there is a choice of language, of which now here we do not involve the use of ordinary language. Here at writing these literary works, we involve the use of literature expresses social realities in oral aspect like economic, social, and political through language. It is true that, my dear students, that literature expresses social, economic, and political issues because as literature expresses those things, it involves the use of language. Language has been used as a tool of communication in literary works or in other works, because language is what can make people to communicate different messages or different ideas. So now in the social and the political, economic, now literature has been used so that it can present the issues that are occurring in the community. Example, in the novel that is by Edukea Tanzania, the novel titled The Beautiful One Are Not Yet Born in Ghana. That is, it is talking about Ghana before independence. That is Ghana before independence. So now Ghana before independence and after independence experienced a number of the problems. Example, there was poor leadership, there is selfish, there is corruption, there is unemployment, there is poor living conditions, poor infrastructure, and so on. So here now, the author, Edukea Tanzania, tries to use this novel, The Beautiful One Are Not Yet Born, like it is a political novel. That novel, it is expresses about the system of the leadership. Example, in the book there is the reader that is Kumsun, and Kumsun now looks to be a corrupt leader, a selfish, and sometimes he uses his power to undermine the citizens. Whereby now also there is the bus driver that is the head of the state. Also there is the conductor. And there is the passenger. The passenger that is the citizens. So the citizens in the novel that is titled The Beautiful One Are Not Yet Born, people are suffering from the poor living conditions, while leaders are enjoying the national cake. So here now, according to this point, I have tried to relate with these books with this point because there is social and political problems that is faces or challenges the community because of the poor leadership. Also, if the poor leadership is presented in the text, that is about the political issues. So now the author tries to show how people are suffering in Nigeria and in Ghana through different problems that he encounters due to the poor leadership. So now here social and economic issues are being presented through the text. So now if the author now tries to express those things, use language. So now through using language, people now read the text and they come up with the general conclusion of which now they can decide even to make the corporate arts, or they can decide even to make the organization so that they can initiate the strikes so that now the government could change the system. Also point number 4, that is literature elements such as fables, legend, myth are expressed through language. As we saw yesterday that myth, we are talking about the history or the events of a certain place that talking about the past events. So here now we have done with point number 4. Let us see point number 5. Point number 5, that language is a part of people culture. Language is a part of people culture because it is true that language is a part of people culture because language is what uses or used to transfer culture or elements of culture from one generation to another generation. So through using language now, you can see even child or children acquires the culture of their parents or grandfather through communicating using language. So language is the part of people culture, hence social cultural aspect that are transmitted in literature should use language. So through using language now, you can find that it is very simple to acquire a culture of a certain place. So my dear students, thank you very much. We have done with this difference between, so now let us see the difference between ordinary language and literary language. We are talking about language and literature. So now we need to see now the difference between ordinary language and literary language. So my dear students, before to continue, let me give you the brief explanation about what is ordinary language and what is literary language. When we are talking about the ordinary language, we are talking about the language that is used in the daily lives, or the language of the dictionary. The language of the dictionary, or the language that is used, or the common language, is a language that is is straightforward, because when somebody will speak something, you understand. But literary language, that is the language that is not direct, and it is characterized with full of figurative speech, or it is a language that is used in literary works. That is the difference between ordinary language and literary language. So the first difference is ordinary language is the most common everyday usage of the language among people, while literary language is the figurative form of language that often used in literature. So ordinary language is the language that is commonly used in everyday usage. It is a public language. Can be used in the church, used at school, used at home. But literary language, it is a language that is only used in literature. So that is the first difference between the ordinary language and the literary language. Second point is that ordinary language follows the normal words order. The normal words order in linguistics we call it is syntax. While in literary language, the word order may be changed according to the writer. So here now, ordinary language, it changes according to the writer or the author of the text. The author may decide to choose a certain language, but in ordinary language, we follow syntax, the arrangements of words and its meaning. So that is another difference between ordinary language and the literary language. The third is that ordinary language, it may or may not have figurative speech, while literary language is rich in figurative speech that make it figurative. So the ordinary language, it may employ the use of figurative speech, but it is not compulsory. But in literary language, it is compulsory to use figurative language, so that now you can show how literature differ from another literary works. So through the application of using this literary language, it is what make now the difference between literature from other discipline. So here we have seen now the third points. So now before we wind up, we have this last point, that is ordinary language is straightforward and thus easier to understand the message conveyed, while literary language, its form is difficult for the ordinary man who does not know the literary technique. So here, my dear students, this language means that the ordinary language is the language that is direct. The language that is direct means that when you are speaking about something, people understood what you mean. But the literary language, this is the language that is only understood with those people who are specialized in literature. Because if people have not specialized in literature, could not understand what does it mean. You can find there is idioms, proverb, myth, legend, and the other thing. But if people use hyperbole in the ordinary language, people will not understand what does it mean. So, my dear students, here it is the end of. Okay, my dear students, now let us see the last point, that is, in the ordinary language, words have their original meaning. It is meanings is clear, thus no ambiguity is expressed, while in literary language, words acquire new meaning. Literary works can be read under multiple interpretation. So here now, as we are talking about the difference between the ordinary language and the literary language, the last point tries to explain that the ordinary language, it has its origin, while the literary language, it does not. So here, this implies that the ordinary language, always it has the clear meaning and the direct meaning, whereby now, through interpreting this direct ordinary language, it does not need much energy, because it has its origin. So now you can go direct to the dictionary and then you find the clear meaning of the word, or the syntax, or sometimes the grammatical arrangement of words, because it has its origin. But you can find that in the literature there is a terms used in literary works, and then you find that in the ordinary there is no the meaning of that word. So that is to become the difficult terms, of which now until to get the meaning, maybe sometimes you can use literature dictionary, of which now sometimes it is difficult to get dictionary of literature. So through this now you can find that it ready to the existence of the ambiguity of meaning, or the multiple meaning in interpretation. The existence of the ambiguity, this means you find that one tense, it has more than one meaning, or there is the multiple interpretation. You find that one person interpreting in his own understanding, another interpreting in his own understanding. So you find that there is a confrontation, or the disputes in this literary language, of which now it is due to the application of this figurative language, because the language that is used in literature is not directly proportional compared to the ordinary language. So through this now, my dear students, this is the last point at the difference between the ordinary language and the literary language. So before to wind up now, my dear students, we have this task here, that is, there are two questions. The first question state that give out the difference between riddles and the myth, and the second question state that explain 5 functions of literature in the community. So these questions are very simple, as I have taught. So here you are responsible now to do these questions, and if through using these questions, it is better to relate with the community that you are coming from. Thank you very much, my dear students, for listening. We meet you for the next session.